All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to break down one of the most powerful mental models out there for dealing with uncertainty, the barbell strategy. It's a pretty counterintuitive way of thinking that helps you not just survive, but actually thrive in a world that, let's be honest, we can never really predict. So, let's get into it.
So, to really get why we even need a strategy like this, we first have to talk about something called the turkey problem. It's a really simple story, but it perfectly illustrates a huge blind spot in how we all tend to think about risk.
And this right here is what the author Nassim Nicholas Taleb calls the turkey problem. Just imagine it. For 1,000 straight days, the turkey's confidence that it's safe just keeps growing. Every single piece of data it gathers tells it that life is good and it's only getting better. But here's the kicker. Just as its feeling of certainty hits an all-time high, its actual risk of total disaster is also at its absolute peak. The past, it turns out, is a terrible predictor of the future.
So, this really makes you wonder, right? How can our plans, our forecasts, and our models of the world completely fall apart right at the moment we need them to work? Well, it's because of these rare, massive impact events, what Taleb famously calls black swans. You know, the financial crashes, the pandemics, the game-changing technologies that seem to come out of nowhere and change everything overnight.
The problem is, we tend to plan for a world that Taleb calls mediocristan. It's a nice, neat world where things are predictable, where randomness is mild, and everything follows a tidy bell curve. But the reality is, we actually live in extremistan, a wild, unpredictable place where a single event, just one outlier, can completely change the game. In extremistan, the whole idea of average is basically a fiction.
Okay, so if we can't see these huge, catastrophic events coming, what are we supposed to do? Well, this is where the simple, kind of beautiful elegance of the barbell strategy comes into play.
And what's so fascinating here is that it completely rejects moderation. The barbell strategy basically says that the balanced, medium-risk middle ground is actually the most fragile, the most dangerous place to be. Instead, you combine two total opposites: extreme, hardcore safety on one side and extreme, speculative risk-taking on the other.
When it comes to investing, this often looks like a 90-10 split. You put 90% of your money into assets that are pretty much immune to blowing up, making your foundation solid as a rock. Then, with the remaining 10%, you go for it. You make highly speculative bets that have the potential for massive, explosive upside.
So what does that actually look like? Well, that big 90% safe side is your fortress, right? It's built with things like treasury bills, cold hard cash, maybe even gold. And that other 10%, the risky side, that's your exploration fund. Think of things like investing in startups, stock options, or crypto. The key is, the absolute most you can lose is that initial 10%. But the potential gain, it's pretty much unlimited.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The goal of the barbell isn't just to make it through a crisis. The real magic is that it positions you to actually profit from chaos and disorder when they inevitably show up.
And this brings us to a huge concept: antifragility. You know, we often think that being robust is the goal, like a phoenix that can get burned down but then comes back just the same. But antifragility is a whole other level. It's more like the Hydra from Greek mythology. You cut off one head and two grow back in its place. It doesn't just resist shocks, it literally feeds on them to get stronger.
This shows us that any system really only has three ways to respond to stress. You've got fragile systems, like a super optimized supply chain that just break under pressure. Then you've got robust systems, like a concrete bridge that resists the pressure. But then you have anti-fragile systems, like evolution itself, that actually need stress and randomness to get better. The barbell is a practical tool designed specifically to build these anti-fragile systems.
So, how does this all work, mathematically? Well, it all comes down to a really cool principle called favorable asymmetry. You're just structuring your bets so that your potential gains from a good surprise are way, way bigger than your losses from a bad one.
Think of it like this. With those speculative bets, your downside is capped. It's sealed off. You know exactly what you stand to lose, your 10%. But your upside? It's completely uncapped, wide open to those wild 1,000% black swan events. You're basically positioned to catch lightning in a bottle while being totally protected from getting struck by it.
Now, this isn't just some abstract financial theory for Wall Street. The true power of the barbell is that you can take this idea and apply it to almost any part of your life to become more resilient and, honestly, more opportunistic.
Let's start with your career. I mean, think about it. How many people are stuck right there in that fragile middle, completely dependent on one job at one company?
The barbell career completely avoids that trap. You have your 90% accountant. That's the safe, stable job that pays the bills and keeps the lights on.
That security then gives you the freedom to pursue your 10% rock star. That speculative side hustle, a creative passion, a startup idea. I mean, think of Albert Einstein, the patent clerk who secretly revolutionized physics, or Franz Kafka, the insurance guy who became a literary legend.
And this same logic applies perfectly to our health and fitness, where, again, many of us are kind of stuck in a moderate and ultimately fragile routine.
So instead of that chronic, moderate jogging that so often leads to repetitive stress injuries, the barbell approach combines two extremes. You spend 90% of your time on very low-intensity activity, like long walks. Then, for that other 10%, you engage in very short, very high-intensity workouts, like heavy lifting or all-out sprints. This kind of acute stress is what forces the body to adapt and grow stronger. It literally becomes anti-fragile.
But I've got to say, actually putting this strategy into practice isn't easy. It takes a huge psychological shift and a real willingness to stand out from the crowd.
This is the really hard part. During those long, calm periods, your barbell will probably underperform a typical balanced portfolio. You have to ignore all the experts telling you to get out of cash and get into the market. You have to be comfortable looking like an idiot, sometimes for years, knowing you're ready for the one day that really matters. It takes humility, admitting what you don't know, and a healthy dose of paranoia about what could go wrong.
And really, that's the core idea here. The barbell strategy is you admitting, hey, I'm terrible at predicting the future, so instead of even trying, you build a system in your money, your career, your health that is designed from the ground up to benefit from that unpredictability, whatever it might be.
And that brings us to the final and maybe the most critical question, the one for you to think about. In your own life, in your investments, your job, your habits, where are you exposed to that fragile middle? And what might it look like to apply a barbell instead?